It's time for
Scripts and Scriptures Disclaimers.
Jean Verhoeven here with some very important information. My panel and I just finished watching this film. Some people use this show to see if they want to see the movie, and some people watch the movie first and then listen to us. The list is available at wicxradio.org. If you're part of the first group, then
beware, there are plot spoilers in the following discussion.
We also have to tell you, while we think they are smart, witty, insightful, and profound, our opinions are solely ours and do not reflect the management, staff, or board of WICX or affiliated radio groups, or maybe even you. However, our panel is very proud of the results. We are not theologians or apologists, but we are movie fans and hope you are too. Enjoy. Ready? Lights, camera, action!
Take one. That clapboard tells us it's time for Scripts and Scriptures. I'm Jean Verhoeven. We will be watching spiritually inspired films and shows and discussing their quality, insight, value, and enjoyment. I am so happy to welcome Susan Stevens, who's with us tonight, along with Lloyd Kintz, and radio host Daniel Saletti. His show is As the Reel Turns. Daniel actually does basically the same show with secular movies. We watched The Shack. As Papa would say, I am especially fond of this movie. I think it's life-changing. I think it's life-changing every time I watch it. I believe it gave me one more teeny tiny microscopic baby step toward grasping the Trinity. I am also the first one to say it is not a Catholic story in detail, but certainly a Christian one. It was written as a gift to the author's children one Christmas when his wife said, "Why don't you write him a story?" There are some things to look for in this movie. It's not so much a redemption story as it is about healing. There is an absence of an evil being. Now they do talk about evil, but it's not an evil being versus just free will decisions. And regardless of religion, loss is the common thread throughout the movie. The Shack was a 2007 book that was self-published and swept the country, mostly by word of mouth. I actually read the book after the movie. In some ways it followed very closely. Some things were altered or are omitted. Some of that might have been just for space and time, but I noticed some changes were made to make it more palatable to the diversity of believers out there, and we'll talk a little more on that later. It was directed by Stuart Hazeldine in 2017. It stars Sam Worthington, Oscar winner Octavia Spencer, and singer Tim McGraw. Mackenzie Allen Phillips' youngest daughter, Missy, has been abducted during a family vacation, and evidence that she may have been brutally murdered is found in an abandoned shack deep in the Oregon wilderness. 4 years later, in this midst of his great sadness, Mac receives a suspicious note apparently from God, inviting him back to that shack for a weekend. Against his better judgment, he arrives at the shack on a wintry afternoon and walks back into his darkest nightmare. What he finds there will change his life forever. I would say it was also his most glorious time. Now, I'm going to start saying at the beginning of these shows, spoiler alerts, so hopefully you've seen the movie before you listen to this show. Okay, so in the beginning, Mac as a child meets a loving, sympathetic neighbor. Was the neighbor God, or did Mac see God as the neighbor because she was a caring person in his life? What do you think?
As a child, I don't think he thought of her as God. He just thought of her. In fact, you can tell he was very withdrawn. And she's the one to say, have a piece of pie. And that's not a question. You have a piece of pie. And to give him comfort. And not really realizing that was God, I think if it's a guardian angel, giving comfort when he needed it.
I think that's a great explanation. I can't contribute any more than that.
I'm not sure that the neighbor was God. I think maybe when he met God, he used her personification to label God, I think. But I think the neighbor was a real person, but a very loving one, though. Daniel, did you have any comment on that?
No, I can't do anything on that.
Do some people come by a relationship with God like Nan has, naturally, or is it learned, or is it earned?
I think it's a gift. I think that it's just some people naturally can talk to God, live with God, argue with God. Fiddler on the Roof comes to mind.
Oh, very good. Yeah, that's right. He had a lot to say to him.
And not everybody's like that. Some can.
It's only few people that have an open heart that the Holy Spirit can just whoosh in. I'm not one of them that have to learn to have a relationship with
There's
God.
that whooshing again, that wind leg.
Yes.
The story seemed to unfold because of a bump on the head. Was the whole encounter, was it really the bump talking, or was it real in his world?
That's something you have to ask yourself, I think. Ask yourself, what do you think it is? Could that really happen to you, or is it maybe just it was all just a dream, all Wizard of Oz or something like that, sort of? Because it's kind of like that. It's kind of like that movie. You start in this bleak, sort of black and white world, and you enter this color world. All these nice things happen, and then you could go back to your real life, or like you could go back home where there's no place like it, or you could stay here with the nice things.
Mm-hmm.
So.
With the wizard.
With something, so that's something about it. But you mentioned that, it's like a question that you ask about people in comas. Do they want to come back, or do they want to stay? So,
Well, there are the NDEs, near-death experiences, and a lot of people have talked about visions or conversations or whatever. Now, is it just a biochemical function of the brain? Who knows? But it's certainly real at the time, I think.
And this made a great story transition from
very good, yeah.
From the shack details,
Right.
the reality type of scenes.
So Mac takes his family camping, and they go by a favorite waterfall. Ah, the waterfall. Is the waterfall just water, and is the story he tells about the Indian princess, is that just a story?
I'm sure there would be a legend that would have inspired that story. There's some sort of oral tradition, maybe with the local Indians from many generations before, that would have been great inspiration.
This waterfall is a real place in Oregon, too.
It's funny, I saw, what's her name, Missy? Mm-hmm. It's almost she sacrifices herself to save her father. Mm. And then after he kind of forgives, the waterfall appears. It almost is like analogous to that. Right.
When I heard the story of the Indian princes, I just saw the parallels to the story of Christ. He volunteers to sacrifice himself. He doesn't want to, but he will. And then I forget. Does the princess come back to life or whatever, or she lives on in her people or whatever? Yeah, and the father is pleased with her and all that. So that's what I was getting.
And the waterfall starts.
And the waterfall starts. Right. Okay. So Nan, Mac's wife, has called God Papa, and even Mac says, it's a little too intimate, too familiar for me. What is the deal with this Papa business? Is this a good thing? Can we do this?
Well, I mean, there's 1,000 other names that he's called.
True.
Some are like a little, well, what does that name exactly mean? Why would you call him that? And, it could be a good introduction for if you're a kid in school or something, Mm-hmm. Well, maybe we won't immediately start with the whole God necessarily, but let's pivot to Papa because you're 6 years old. Maybe like a grade school type of a thing. But I mean, he was a grown man. Maybe it's time to say like, maybe we should back off a little bit. Maybe we should call him like, something more
father.
Adultish, or father, or just go with the flat out God or something like that.
I think for God, for an ultimate being, it's just not related to gender. It's just perception.
He is
a
spirit after all, and while this is where we get into the Trinity stuff. While he is the father, and he's the father of a son, when you get right down to it, he's a pure spirit, so it is kind of genderless. But it would, if he's referred to as the father, he acts like a father, and
we're seeing that the show gives us lots of themes to talk about.
Lots of themes.
Lots of really powerful concepts being developed in the movie.
The creative staff on this movie, they strive to make the effects, and I love that they did this. They strive to make the effects mystical versus magical. I'm sure the human brain, I know mine, could never conceive of God's perception of things. Christ said, "Oh, you boy, if you like those stars, you should see them the way we see them." And then they said, "Okay, we're going to let you see something the way we see it," and so forth. I mean, I thought it was very clever, but we obviously, who knows? But I think it was a good shot. There were many great effects, but one that actually made me gasp, and not because it was technologically amazing, but because of what it meant. And this was the scars of the nails from the cross, not in the Son's wrist, but in the Father's. Now, was that another way to tie the Trinity into one?
Maybe because I have a biochemistry background. My understanding of the Trinity is like H2O. It's the same molecule. It could be in liquid form in water. It could be a solid form in ice. Or it can be a gaseous form as in steam, but it's still H2O. And that's how I can
That's really
do
good.
the Trinity. It's the same molecule in different forms.
That's really good. You know, we always hear the St. Patrick and his shamrock, but I like that.
And they can exist at the same time.
Yeah, it's not like
It's separate.
he morphs into the three different
Right.
things, or it's three facets of his personality. Not really. Yeah, it blows my mind. Thank God for faith on that one, because that would never have occurred to me before. It was the Father suffered as much as the Son and bears the scars of the crucifixion. That was amazing. Okay, so Mac meets the Trinity, and needless to say, he's taken aback. But we're not here to list all the reactions in the movie. We'd be here for 3 hours. But at one point, they're making introductions, and a couple of times he noted that, well, you know what I'm thinking, you know what I'm going to say before I say it. He looks at the three of them, and he says, kind of hesitantly, he says, well, which one of you? And then he's cut off by the three of them, a chorus of, I am. Is there a significance to the answer? I mean, why didn't just one of them say I am, or why didn't they say I am one at a time? It was a significant answer. Why did they say it that way?
It's simply a reference to the Bible. It ties it right back to the Yahweh. Who am I?
And they all said it together, so that was another unity, another symbol of unity. That's what I got. Okay, but let's think about this now. We did talk about the neighbor. If you don't understand that part, Octavia Spencer plays the neighbor, and she plays God the Father. Okay, so yeah, since this is going on in his head? We haven't concluded that yet. However, come on now. Where's casting? A woman as God the Father? Is that sacrilegious? And with such a sense of humor, no less. She was great. Was that okay? Was that okay to have a woman as God the Father?
Well, does God have a gender?
Well, we talked about that. You're right. Good question.
I'm just thinking, how do you talk about God if you can't talk to him, if it's not easy to communicate with him, if he's so far away and so powerful and so very different than we are? To understand God, to discuss God, we need to somehow be able to relate to him.
Right.
And this is a good device.
Yeah, and she even said, because Mac was surprised too, and she even said, where you're at and what you're feeling, I thought you didn't want a father right now, you wanted a mother.
Yeah, he had some daddy issues.
He did, rightfully so.
Right.
Although Mac did stop the cycle of abuse, which was good. We saw it handed down generation to generation.
And there have been weirder castings for God.
Well, that's true.
George Burns.
George Burns.
With a cigar.
Yeah. I mean, if you get George Burns with a cigar, and then if you can have John Delancey Q playing God in one episode of Star Trek, then you can have Octavia Spencer.
I don't know if he was the God, but God introduces herself. I don't have the name right. Aloysius?
Oh, yeah.
Aloysius, something like that.
Something like that.
And the Holy Spirit is introduced as, I think it's Sarayu.
Sarayu.
Right.
Right.
Okay. It's interesting though they have names, and Sarayu translates, by the way, as the wind or the rush of the wind or something like that, which you've mentioned on other occasions. That
I've heard that, and I don't. When you feel like a brush of wind, it's the Holy Spirit trying to whisper something.
wake you up. Usually, what is the Holy Spirit? A dove is what we usually get. Now we've got this very centered, kind of Zen person.
Nice looking lady.
Oh, she's beautiful. Anyway, she's the master gardener, and she says she wants to plant something in the middle of this crazy wild garden, which ultimately represents Mac. And they're digging away. They I thought it was interesting. She said, we have to clear out the middle part here, and he says, but it's gorgeous. And she says, we got to take it down to the roots. And I thought, okay, got to take it down to the roots. What do you think of that? It took me a while to come up with a theory, but what do you think?
Maybe sometimes, even if something's so good, you have to, make way for something brand new. You may love something very much. However, it could be just a memory, you got to take it down, got to start new. You're starting a new chapter. I kind of understand that because, I had some great times in the past at school and stuff like that. But unfortunately, sometimes you don't hear from people and, you have to start brand new. You have to find brand new ways of doing things. And so that's I kind of get that from what they're doing.
Yeah, especially in your case, recently graduating college and heading out into the next chapter.
Yeah.
That's very appropriate. Well, while they were digging, they came upon this root that was there, and Sarayu stops Mac and says, oh, that's a poisonous root, and that could kill you. But then she says, if you take this root and that flower and mix it together, there's great healing qualities. Now, there's got to be a message there. What do you find in that?
It's something that Mac wouldn't know, mortal wouldn't know, but it's the Holy Spirit telling you it's poisonous, stay away from this. So it to me it was, and she knew if you mix it with the flower, it's healing. To me, it's a message saying, listen, if you feel like the Holy Spirit's speaking to you,
Listen up.
listen up, because she knows things that you wouldn't know.
Do you have a different take?
One of the things really great about this movie is it makes you think.
It does.
And it stimulates the imagination. And so I'm still sort of thinking about this, but we've got a couple parables like the mustard seed. Mm-hmm. And they suggest that you get something different than what you think you're going to get when you create things. So I'm still working on this one, and it's this movie doesn't let you go after.
That's a very good way to put it. It does not let you go. I found that maybe no matter how bad things get in your life, if you mix it with the flower of God's help, God's grace, that we can learn from the bad stuff in our lives, and we can get strength from it, maybe. I don't know. You're right. It's a very nice thing about this movie. There's a lot of interpretation. And speaking of interpretation, okay, we got Mac out in the middle of the lake. And Christ told him, I want you to show you something on the other side of the lake, but if you want to take the boat out till I get there, go ahead. So he takes the boat out, and he's on this gorgeous mountain lake. And all of a sudden, I thought they were going to play the theme from Jaws, because the boat starts to shake, and there's something underneath it, and it's bumping it up and down. And Mac's getting more scared, and he looks into the water, and he sees his son that almost drowned, and when he goes to help him, he plunges his hand into the water, and it comes back coated with this awful black goo. Now the boat is springing leaks and starting to sink. What do you think was under the boat, and why was the whole lake turning black?
Reminds me of in the Bible of when the disciples are on a boat and this terrible storm comes, and they're almost the boat, I guess, almost capsized, and they're, Lord, help me.
Yep.
And Lord says, what, oh ye of little faith, and all of a sudden the seas are calm.
Anything to add, Daniel?
No.
Nothing to add on that
Okay.
one.
I have to wonder, one thing in this movie, I think we're either coming up on it or we touched on it, that they talk about bad decision making and as a result of free will, but they don't necessarily talk about a devil, or I guess they do talk about the concept of evil, but not a person. You've got to wonder who was literally rocking the boat. Was the devil trying to draw him more into the darkness and more into the rockiness of the boat? Certainly scared the devil out of him. It was quite the scene.
So try to get him scared so he doesn't off his focus
Right.
on Jesus.
Right.
Knowing that Jesus said he'll be there.
Right.
He'll always be there with you.
And I wonder if the black was his guilt that he couldn't shake because he felt Missy and everything else. That was his guilt, and it was just visible to him, on him. At this point, the movie kind of diverts from the book. Although it's very clever, it walks right up to the line and puts like one toe over. The book speaks outrightly against organized religion. Now, I picture the producers sitting around the conference table telling the author, look at Paul, I think his name is, if you want the evangelicals and the mainline Protestants and even those Catholics to show up, you've got to give up that line. It's going to have to be changed, because the book says that Christ is against organized religion. And
friends.
it says, he says, it's hard to disagree when Christ says that religion is a lot of work, because I think as all practicing Catholics, we know that religion is a lot of work. But evidently it's a lot of work for him. But that hard work is a good thing for the person and the soul. I said in the beginning that this is not a Catholic movie, and I'm sure there are many canonical, cringes in this movie. But in this case, at least, and actually in other movies I've seen, I'm strong enough in my faith that those comments, they actually don't move me away from my Catholicism. In some ways, it's brought me closer to my Catholicism. I also know that this is a movie. It's a fictionalized writing, which I can accept the potholes that come up that are either non-Catholic or whatever. I don't know. Did it move any of you away from being Catholic?
I thought it was more Catholic and when the hard work, but I thought that was geared to other religions, because Catholicism is all on your communion in the body and blood of Christ.
Mm-hmm.
That there's no work in that. I mean, but other religions, such as maybe Pentecostals, they can't drink, they can't dance, they can't play cards. I mean,
That's hard work.
That's hard work.
That's hard work.
Mormons, no caffeine, no alcohol.
Caffeine. It's all those rules, but it actually is, God is saying, Jesus, I should be the focus. You should have a relationship on me, and all those other rules, kind of hard work. They would for me, especially the caffeine. But,
Cheers, yeah.
So I thought it was being Catholicism in the purest form.
I heard a very interesting comment. It was by a convert. I think she was brought up Lutheran. She became an evangelical Baptist. Her husband was an atheist, and they ultimately both end up Catholics, to make this long story short. But she said she knew that she needed healing. She knew the only way to obtain healing was the touch of Christ. And she said, and where else but the Catholic Church can you physically, tactily, is that the right word, touch the actual body and blood of Christ? The Catholic Church. And she found the healing she needed. It was beautiful the way she put it. During this whole time, in this walking up to the line about organized religion, the Lord said that he doesn't want slaves through religion. He wants friends and family. Do you think, is that what religion does to us? It makes us slaves?
To me, religion is more about trust than slaves. It's willingness to accept things we can't maybe rationally prove. It's trust, belief, hope.
It's really setting you free to a degree.
Yeah. So
Free of sin.
I enjoy the trust, and I'm thankful I don't have to understand everything. I mean, I tried eigenfunctions once in mathematics, and I'm really glad I don't have to solve any of those. So trust is fine with me.
Padre Pio was big on that. Pray, don't worry. You got to trust. And that was kind of his motto.
But getting back to slaves, I think
Yes.
God has a sense of humor, because that movie, I heard that someplace. Christ doesn't want slaves. So God made me go through my Bible because I found it. The Gospel according to John, chapter 15, verse 15. I no longer call you slaves, because a slave does not know what his master is doing. I have called you friends, because I have told you everything, and I've heard from my Father.
And there you go.
And I said, God has a sense of humor. It took me a long time. I heard slave. So I was going through the New Testament.
You need a concordance.
I do. I'm like... So I said, this is why this movie resonates, because every scene, it's God trying to tell me, it's like God is playing through like the New Testament in a way, God's messages.
It took my Christian Reform friend to teach me what a concordance was.
What is that?
Oh, it's basically Google.
Okay.
It's I
should have Googled it. Oh my goodness.
Yeah, in the quote old days, it was a cross-reference book that you pick
index.
Yes, you pick a word, neighbor, and you look up neighbor, and it would give you every reference in the Old and New Testament to neighbor, and then you can find your.
It would have saved me an afternoon.
It probably would.
This show brought to you by Google.
The thing is, in doing that, I was getting a little frustrated. Where is it? Ooh. And I said, maybe God is telling me, Susan, you should look through the Bible.
He wants you more friendship there.
And that's what I said, the Holy Spirit saying, kind of.
I always have trouble whether is that my thought, is that God's thought, which is it? And I think, I better follow most of them, because just in case they're not my own
that's
thought.
What I thought. I was getting pretty frustrated, and I go, what's? And then I thought, I'm going through the Bible.
Probably a good thing. And I love how in the movie, they're in somebody's cottage, supposedly. He opens the nightstand drawer and there's a Gideon Bible in there. It was great.
What else would you expect?
Exactly. And speaking of trust, now I'm sure there's a symbol here and I'm not getting it. Maybe you are. Christ tells him, okay, you've got to do this part on your own, walk this path, and when you get to the end of the path, keep going. Well, what's at the end of the path? He's at a rock face of a mountain. And yet he knows enough to kind of push, and then his arm goes right into the mountain there. I don't know. Would you have known enough to push the mountain? I don't know if I would.
Well, at this rate,
it must mean something. That one I don't get.
At
Help
this
me.
rate, so many other crazy things have happened. I just, let's try it.
Well, that's true.
You can walk on water. Maybe I can,
That's true.
Maybe I can shift through rock. Oh, yeah, here we go.
I guess when you get to the end of the path, keep going till you get where you have to be. So Matt goes into the mountain and he meets the embodiment of wisdom. He thinks she's getting on his case when in reality she wasn't judging him. She wanted him to be the judge. Do you think that we're all on an everyday course like Mac, where we make ourselves the judges? Are we judging people all the time?
I think we have to. Not that to condemn people, but to make ourselves effective, to not trust people who are headed in the wrong direction. So, to me, judgment is a skill to be learned. Maybe I'm mixing up the definition of the word judgment, but somebody that's not a good driver, you don't want to let him be a bus driver. And there's other things. You don't want to trust your money to somebody who has addiction problems. You've got
good examples.
You got to be able to figure out what's going on around you.
It's very hard today because, especially when it comes to parenting, you're familiar with the concept of relativism. I think that kind of reared its head probably since the 60s and all the revolutions that happened back then. Whereas, hey man, if that works for you and you're okay with it, far be it from me. And there's even a theory that says politicians don't want us to judge so that they can get away with more, because relativism says, if you do it and it's okay with you, that's all right. Doesn't mean that's okay with me. What is that? And there's, of course, the biggest example of that is, well, I'm a Catholic or even not a Catholic, and I personally could never have an abortion. But if you think you should have an abortion, that's okay. Everything is okay. I'm okay. You're okay. That was kind of the mantra.
Okay.
Okay. But I find as a parent, if you're going to teach right from wrong, like you said, it doesn't mean the judgment comes with condemning. Maybe there's different levels or capital J and a small j of judging. How do you not teach hopefully you teach them to hate the sin and love the sinner, but there's got to be judgment, or else you're not going to have right from wrong. I mean, we've got the rules, we're supposed to follow them, 1 through 10.
But I think it's different than judgment, which this case, God can only judge, not you see the judge.
Right.
But it's different than if you go what God says, the rules. I shouldn't say rules, but the 10 Commandments. Those are the things, are not judgment. Those are the things that we should hold all of us accountable for.
Right.
So it's not us judging, it's just holding us accountable what God says to do.
So if we rely on God and trust these teachings and love Him, don't you think it's kind of a normal human reaction to reject or even judge Him when tragedy occurs? We accept He's everywhere, all-knowing, all-powerful, and, I mean, those are right words out of Mac's mouth. We think He lets us down. Does He?
Well, again, it all comes down to being, you gotta blame someone, and you don't want to blame yourself. And when you have no one else to blame physically, you say, it's your fault, Almighty. Gosh darn it.
Pardon the expression.
What?
If you can do everything, why aren't you fixing this?
Exactly.
So,
But if He can do everything, then He's doing this for a reason.
But is He, as it's pointed out in many of these films we watch, is He causing the tragedy? Is He letting the tragedy happen? Does He not control that? How does that work?
I'm in 2 points. Well, I'm looking through the verses here. One came out on Matthew 13, verse 14. You shall indeed hear, but not understand. You shall indeed look, but never see. When it was asked, God, why can't you do this? Why can't you do miracles? And so it sounded to me as if there's some sort of grand plan that us mortals don't know about. But then I said, well, why does God give us a mind? Why does God give us the free will to try to make sense of this world?
I think it's all part of God's wrath. You know what?
Now, come on, you're too many spoilers here. What Mac is dealing here is the loss of a child, and it's funny because in the English language, we have the word widow and widower for somebody who loses a spouse, and we have the word orphan for somebody who's lost their parents. But the English language does not have a word for the parent who loses a child. And that's definitely a category. Maybe you are one. We know people who have lost a child or a baby, and it usually drives the parents closer or drives them apart. And before we attack God, we have to remember that the Blessed Mother, and actually is brought out in this film, God the Father, are parents who have lost a child. I think that helps a little bit, and also making Mac the judge, that also puts us, infinitesimally, microscopically into God's head or heart so that we can see it maybe just a little bit about the judging and how it goes.
You can see into Mac's heart the utter devastation of your soul.
Right.
So
that's the word.
And in a point, you think that's what God went through, losing His son. So at a point, Mac and God,
they're on the same frequency.
Right. You see, right.
So as he continues on with wisdom there, oh, look, more water.
Maybe they should have called this movie The Watershed.
But
there's a lot of water, you notice it?
Yeah.
The water on the lake, the waterfall.
That's right.
A lot of water.
And through this water, we see happy kids playing in a field with Christ Himself. And wisdom tells Mac it's time to let it go. All this pain, all this guilt, all this suffering. So Mac actually steps into the water, through the waterfall, and just stands there like he's in the nicest shower you've ever been in. Okay, I think this one's a little easy, but gee, what do you think that was telling us?
Confirmation.
No, wrong one. Try again.
Anointing of the sick.
Oh, come on, hit me. Okay, baptism and/or confession. I think really because it just washing away.
Cleansing.
Cleansing. That's the right word. Cleansing his soul, cleansing his heart, cleansing his mind, cleansing his body, for that matter. So as long as we're on this water theme, when we were talking about the boat and the darkness and all that, the way he got out of it was much like the story of Peter. Christ is all of a sudden he's standing next to the boat, and he's saying, "Just look at me. Just look at me. Just concentrate on me. Just listen to my voice. Christ. He gets Mac up and out, and sure enough, they're both walking on the water. Well, after he has the meeting with wisdom, they have to get back across the lake to the shack. And so Mac takes off his shoes and socks, and he starts to walk into the water, and it's up to his knees. It didn't work when he tried to do it alone, and Christ says things always work better when they work together, don't you think? Okay, this is another easy one. Is that the key? Is that the key to walking on water in our own lives, so to speak?
Can't do it alone. You can't do that alone.
I'm not even sure. Human support is, I think it's crucial, but sometimes it's not enough. Sometimes, most of the time, all the time, maybe it's not enough.
And of course, I don't know where this is. I'm not that great on the scriptures. In his mind, he thought he can do it by himself. But then he has the realization. There's a story where they're walking on the beach or something in the sand print, and the man turns around,
right,
and he's having a terrible time, some tragedy, and he looks around. There's only one set of footprints.
Right.
And he said, "God, where were you when I needed you?" And he said, "I was there all the time. I was carrying you."
I know. I love that one.
And I love that one. And it sounds like Matt thought he can do it, walk on water himself. I can't do it alone. I need to recognize that God is with me all the time.
All the time.
One of the best moments, and it was just before they headed back to the shack when they were on the beach, and he's just come back from wisdom. Mac just spontaneously, kind of like a little kid, spontaneously sort of leaps into a hug of Christ, and he's not startled or anything. It's just like, he says, "I'm so proud of you," and I thought it was one of the most beautiful things. It was really a nice moment. Now Mac gets to see for a few moments what the Trinity sees in the heavens, as well as looking out into this field, and there's all this color and light, and the Holy Spirit explains that what you see as personality and emotion, we see as color and light and what have you, and it's all vibrating and moving and changing color. So he sees one in particular that leaves this group to come over to him, and we establish the fact that Mac's abusive father is there in heaven. So I'm hoping that means we have a chance. Dad forgives Mac. So his father forgives Mac. At that point, does Mac forgive the dad? And is that what finally gets him to ultimately forgive God? Is that really the turning point? I mean, he's been adding layer and layer and layer all the time he's been at the shack. Do you think this is the ultimate forgiveness?
There's a lot of forgiveness going on.
Yeah, that's a good thing.
Because the dad has to forgive Mac for poisoning.
Right.
It's a spoiler.
That's okay.
So Mac has to forgive his dad,
right,
for beating him, and his dad has to forgive his father
dad,
for
right,
beating him, and Matt has to forgive himself because he blames himself for his daughter's death. And
he also blames God the Father, so he's got to forgive God the Father, and God's got to forgive him.
And it's this whole circle where forgive and you shall be forgiven. So you have to forgive yourself and others, and you will be forgiven.
And how many times do you have to do that?
70 times 70 or something.
There you go.
Like that.
Here, I forgive you.
Thank you.
I don't know what for, but I forgive you.
But it's interesting. I was to forgive you. Each had to ask. I remember the father saying, "Will you forgive me?" Mm-hmm. And he had to say, "Will you forgive me?"
Yeah.
It was asking for, and to me that goes back asking for forgiveness. And it so many layers this film, and it always brings back. We are all beggars at the foot of Christ. We are begging for forgiveness.
And something really important about this film is now it's expanding our scope across generations, such that it's not the simple current situation that we're reacting to.
Right.
It's going across generations. So it's another thing that causes you maybe to look at the film more than once and get a extended perception of what's happening.
And that our scope, when we're upset, we don't forgive someone, broadens the vision that his father was beaten. And that's where he learned.
Right. And luckily, Mac breaks the cycle. He's a great dad. So forgiving your dead dad, and even forgiving the Almighty, are relatively easy, I think, compared to forgiving your child's murderer and or rapist. In this depiction, it seemed like God was willing to accept "fake it till you make it" as valid. Max, he was like, "No, I want to hurt him. I want you, God, to hurt him. I don't know how to do this." And because it was when he comes to the conclusion, like, oh, you want me to forgive him. Yeah. And he gets the light bulb goes on. It's like, oh, no. He said, what do you say? And I can tell you, I had a situation. It took me 8 years and 3 priests to finally forgive someone. And when I got to that point, I said, I wish this person no ill will, no harm, only a happy, fulfilled life. And I meant it from the bottom of my heart. I just can't be part of it. And so I said to the priest, so have I forgiven? And he looked at me and he said, well, for you on this one, yeah, I think you made it. Because, there's all this talk about, you forgive somebody as a gift to yourself, and it's what you need to do to go on, not for the other person, and it doesn't mean you have to be buddy-buddy, but it is really hard, because you can forgive, but boy, that forgetting part is kind of tough. And in the movie, Papa says, forgiving is not the starting of a relationship, it's letting go of his throat. And I thought, oh, good, then I can wish him well and not necessarily be, Anyway, how do you think, how do you do what Mac did? Papa told him, say, I forgive you out loud. And he said you might have to do it 1,000 times. How do you do that?
Well, of course, this is my first inclination. I go, oh, okay, you could say that because you have God there and the Holy Spirit and Jesus helping you out. But it's really hard to do that. Mm-hmm. If someone murdered your child, it may take me 1,000 years in purgatory. I'm not sure. But, and it's terrible. Sure, if I have Jesus, the Holy Spirit, and God, okay, they can help me work on it. But the fake it till you make it, since that God realized it is, when someone wounds you so much, so deeply, and the only person who can wound you is somebody close to you, it's a betrayal. And so, I guess fake it till you make it, it always gives, just faking it, maybe it opens that door sooner or later, at least the door is not shut. Right. Maybe that's what it is. But it's tough, and at least God realizes, it gives us that it is tough.
Now, during this scene, we meet Papa in a different form. In the beginning, because Mac was mad at God the Father, Mac was mad at his father, she, God the Father says, I thought coming to you as a father was you needed a mother. Now he's appearing to Mac as a man, and it doesn't take him too long, Mac, to realize, oh, wait a minute, this is God the Father again. And he says, why the change? And he says, for what we're doing today, you need a father. Do you think that change in form was helpful to the story or a good thing? And do we kind of experience that?
It's certainly helpful to the story. It certainly shows that God will adapt to our needs. That if we don't catch on to something in one way,
he'll hit us over the head
in a different form. So I think it's great.
We all know that he's the same, before, during, and after. But yes, the approach changes. I think he doesn't change it; the approach changes. There was a song there, and it's the lyrics were, "When I don't know what to think, I think about you." Do you think that was Mac thinking about Missy, or do you think it was something else? Missy being the daughter.
I don't know. I really wasn't getting that, really. I feel like it was maybe just a normal song. The thing with this movie is that there can be different interpretations.
If he wasn't thinking about Missy, what was he thinking about? And was Mac actually supposed to be singing it, or was it someone else? Or
it could have been just, maybe we get a look into what Mac's thinking, and we get it in a way that can be presented nicely, I guess, because...
Any other takes?
Well, I took it as Mac at the end saying, I don't know where to go, I'm confused, I'm lost, and that Jesus said, just look at me, and which means, when I'm lost, think of Jesus, because I don't know where to go, and I'm lost. That's how I took it.
We all collectively, I think, said, oh, of course, when we realized that God the Father says, oh yeah, well, she never calls him by name. You notice that? Jesus is never called Jesus or Christ or anything, but they say, oh yeah, he's out in the workshop. Well, he's still a carpenter after all these years. He's still out in the workshop. Did you find the workshop to represent anything, or was it more than a workshop?
I saw it as a studio, a place where you create artistic things, not where you fix things, but where you create works of art.
I like that.
Kind of like God's house, maybe, so maybe like a church.
Yeah, it was definitely shaped with cathedral ceiling type of thing and a peak in the front, and I can see where that's where he does his work.
And it's Jesus, so Jesus is in human form, so he actually has to work.
Right.
Not like the Holy Spirit who can magically,
Mystically
put in flowers. Jesus as the man actually has to work.
Right.
Mystic
And he did
magic.
And he did some beautiful work. Unfortunately, you don't realize till the end what he was working on, but
But he did a fine job with it.
he did a gorgeous job. But yeah, I thought that was kind of nice that he's out there. And I like that, Lloyd. He's creating, not fixing things. I thought that's very good. Speaking of the actor who played Christ, his name is Avraham Aviv Alush. And he is actually, out of all these many, many films over the years, he's actually the first Israeli to play Christ in a movie. Ironically, he is never called Jesus or Christ or Yeshua or any of the names in the film, but he is credited that way in the end credits.
And on subtitles.
And on subtitles. There are two really wonderful moments between him and Mac. Mac says he's most comfortable with him of the three persons, and Christ replies, well, it's probably because I'm human. And the other one is when they race each other across the lake on foot. I thought that was breathtaking because there was a little bit of healthy competition, there was joking,
There was joy.
Joy. There you go.
Which is the precise word that Mac needed.
Right.
And it was joy on Jesus' face.
Yes.
Because he wants that joyous relationship.
Yes. It was said that back in the 60s, early 70s maybe, there were Marian apparitions in a small town, of course, as usual, in Garabandal, Spain. And there were 4 visionaries. And the girls were probably between maybe 12 and 14 or 15. However, because of their seclusion in this teeny tiny town, they were not worldly at all. And socially, they were analyzed right and left, and they were said to be more like, 9, 10, 12 years old, as far as socially speaking. And it is said, and now, accept it, don't accept it, that the Blessed Mother, she came for a couple years, and that she actually, I love this, if it's true, she actually played hide and seek with the 4 visionary girls. That just blew me away. Now, come on, I think she had a little advantage there. Poof over here, poof over there. But
where'd she go?
I think there is that wanting, after all, Mary being human and everything, there was that innocent joy, childlike love and fun and all that.
But what do mothers do?
Exactly.
They play peekaboo.
They play peekaboo with the kids. Yeah.
Sure.
And they just to see the joy of a child's face.
Mm-hmm. I struggle with how casual, how humorous, sometimes how sarcastic, and how human and how intimate can I actually be with the creator of the universe? Because here I am, basically a grain of sand in the big picture of things. I find myself sometimes, being a wise guy or laughing, and then it's like, oh no, I should be lying prostrate on the floor, even mentioning his name. That's what I should be doing when I pray to, because I'm so unworthy, as they say. But if you look at, okay, granted, the race on the lake is a fictionalization, but maybe the hide and seek isn't. I struggle because I want to be that intimate, personalized relationship. I get tired of that word. Oh, you have to have a personal relationship with Christ. Well, you do, but there's more to it, and some religions lead you to believe that's all there is, but there isn't. There's more to it. How playful or human can we get with the Almighty?
You see, again, it's fictionalized most of the time, but it's like you see all these shows and where if a character is in need, they usually say, hello, God, this is so-and-so again.
We haven't talked lately.
We haven't talked lately, but I just wanted to let you know that if you have a time, if you could say or help out so-and-so, I'd really appreciate it. Oh, and by the way, if you could do something else. So something like that, and that's played for laughs usually. Why not? He just said in the movie he wants friends. Mm-hmm. So why not be...
And you showed us the proof.
Why not be friendly?
Friendly.
But only friends. Jesus said he wanted to be friends.
Yeah.
So that's why if there's a burning bush, you're going to be prostrate, right?
Well, no, I'd be
Straight.
freaked out, actually.
But Jesus is the one, that's why I think he's the Son of Man, so he's human, who went through all the human emotions that if you've ever felt betrayed, if you ever, like, especially from one of his best friends, right?
Yeah.
If you ever felt abandoned or misunderstood, you knew Jesus would understand that because he went through all those human emotions.
Right.
Yeah. It's
But God, it's different. God is a little scary, but Jesus, he was a person. He went through
right.
the
And so was the
emotions.
Blessed Mother. So I think you can relate to
I
her
talk to
as a
Mary.
mother.
I pray to Mary more.
There's an old joke about Christ is walking around heaven, and actually I think originally it was geared toward lawyers, but we'll let them off the hook. And Christ is walking around and he sees, John, and he knows John's not supposed to be in heaven, and he says, that's funny. And he keeps walking and he sees Mary, or no, better not be Mary. How about Jane? Sees Jane, and Jane's not supposed to be here in heaven. What's going on? So he walks over to the gate and he says, hey, Peter, what's going on here? I'm seeing, dozens of people who really don't belong here. And Peter lets out a big sigh and he says, oh, it's your mother. She keeps letting him in the back door. So remember that if you need a way in. So another song, the closing theme says, keep your eyes on me. Like the other song a little bit, who is the me? Is it Mac and his changed life? Look at me, I've got a changed life. Or are we keeping our eyes on God? Or is it the Trinity? Or is it Missy? Don't want to forget her. Who do you think that keep your eyes on me? Who's the me?
Oh, the me's got to point to Jesus. It's just anything else would be inconsistent, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with that. But again, with almost every single piece of dialogue and theme in this film, it could be anything. It could be absolutely anything.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty good bet, though.
Well, true. But you just gave like 1,000 people it could have been.
That's
so.
true. That's true. Mac makes his decision to stay on Earth with his family versus the invitation to stay in heaven with Missy. And actually, that's the first time they refer to that existence as the afterlife. They also point out that time is perceived differently there and differently by Missy. So, in other words, if Mac wanted to stay, she'd be happy, but she's also happy to wait because they're full of patience and they really don't have linear time, and it's different there. I don't know. What would you pick? Would you stay or would you come back to your family?
I think Mac had some unfinished business to do on Earth and with his family to make amends. Yeah. And he knew Missy would always be there.
And, even Papa says there, you can go back, but you will be back here.
Yeah. So that's very comforting if you know you got your ticket punch. Yeah, right. Early on, there was a comment that was made. Mac says that this was before all this happened, that his relationship with God is wide, while Nan, his wife, who's very devout, her relationship was deep. Do you think Mac's relationship has changed, so now it also is deep and maybe still wide?
Absolutely. That's what the movie's about. It's Max changing and understanding what's happening.
Because he was a churchgoer before this all happened, but I thought that was a very good way of putting it. He had a certain breadth or width of knowledge, and he was going to church, and he believed, but
his perception of God was a wrathful God.
Right. And
what?
That's a quote. So here's the question. Did it really happen? Or is the real question we're looking at here, could this have happened? Could this scenario have occurred in our own lives or anybody's life?
I believe God intervenes at his pleasure, so it really could happen.
It turns out, we find out that Mac is in the hospital when he finally comes to. You often wonder what's going on in those comas. Is it just a biochemical reaction of the brain, or is that a chance for intervening?
Now, this is going apart from the movie, but I was brought up Christian, but my grandparents were Buddhists. My grandmother was a Christian, but my grandfather was a Buddhist. And I remember asking someone, I said, My grandfather was the kindest, most gentlest, most loving person. I mean, actually, he would go fishing and he would come back really hungry. And my grandmother says, "Where's your sandwich? Did I make you a sandwich?" And he goes, "Oh, I gave it to someone who was hungry." And my grandma, "Why couldn't you just give him half the sandwich?" But he would give. And I said, I just wonder. He was always a Buddhist to the day he died. I mean, he had a pet possum. Because he found it when it was a baby and the mother, so he raised it. I mean, he was that type of person. He was a farmer. He loved, farming. And interesting, brought this back. I was told God is so great. At the moment of death, God never gives up on that he would reach to my grandfather at the moment of death and God would save him. And I thought this question, that he had gotten in an accident. Maybe at the moment of death, God doesn't give up on people. And he took Mac to heal him before, and because maybe he was close to death, and gave him the option of coming back or staying there. And so this movie resonated because it says maybe, and I still believe that with all my heart, the moment of death, that God will be there for redemption.
Yeah, we don't know what happens. We don't know what's in people's hearts or God's heart at that point in time.
But he never gives up. And maybe, like he said, that he never...
And it sounds like he lived a very Christian life when you get right down to it.
But he had hatred in his heart. He had something that wasn't healed. He couldn't have gone to heaven the way he was. God had to heal his heart.
Right.
So, but
maybe he went to the shack.
Right. So you don't know.
Be a fishing shack in this case.
Fishing shack. And I took the shack as someone's soul. It was abandoned. It was neglected. And when it's full of the Trinity, it's this beautiful place. And God showed him that.
In one of the special features, it said, I want to recreate this cottage someplace. And it was just beautiful. And she walked in and she says, "Oh, yeah, this is definitely where God would live." That's right.
I'm especially fond of it.
Any other comments, Lloyd?
It's a great movie.
It's a great movie.
Really make you think, and at the end, I think most people will feel better, a lot better after.
And we highly recommend you watch it more than once.
And you wonder, this film, I don't know much, we saw a little bit about the author, and it's something where you see the hand of God. It's like if you go to see like the Pieta, or you see, my God, no human did this. There was a hand of God. And to me, I felt like this film, the hand of God was in the making of the book or the film.
I have to say the same thing. Every time I watch it, it changes my life another notch. It just, because you don't think of God necessarily in the Trinity in those personifications, but even if a fraction, 10% of it is true, then and like I said before, it brings me closer to God, closer to my Catholicism. It does not drive me away. I just love it. This has been absolutely amazing. We've doubled our discussion time on this particular movie. We hope you'll watch it, and you'll watch it more than once, because I think you'll find something in there for you. So this is Jean Verhoeven for Scripts and Scriptures. May the angels protect you, and may heaven accept you. Thanks very much.